This week, we are discussing how Bitcoin and cryptocurrency can impact the younger generation. I'm joined now by Rye Barcott, co-founder of Double Time Capital and donor to the Bitcoin Summer Camp in Charlotte. Welcome to the show, Rye.
Hey, great to be here, Isaiah.
Oh yeah,
With
great
a
to have
fellow
you,
North
man.
Carolinian.
Oh yeah, North Carolina all day. Glad to have you on, brother. And first before we start, tell us a little bit about your background working with nonprofits and how you came into the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've had a blessing of being a social entrepreneur. I got my start in entrepreneurship in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was before I was going into the Marine Corps. I founded a nonprofit organization that actually continues to this day. It's going to turn 20 years old this summer, which is really a great satisfaction. And this organization invests in talented young people in the Kibera informal settlement in Nairobi, and then does really important public health for the community. And the most important thing about this, and the reason why it's been successful as a volunteer from my end, is because the community owns it. And what I found when I was 19 years old and in this community was a fundamental truth that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And so I
Right.
partnered up with some very talented folks, and we got a lot of good work done there at Carolina for Kibera. And so over the course of my last 20 years, I've started a number of different organizations, including Double Time Capital, which is an impact investment firm. We invest in solar farms around the United States and other things. And so just great to be here with you, and really looking forward to being a small part of the new camp in Charlotte for our young people learning about this new and emerging industry.
Absolutely. And how did you get into Bitcoin? Was it something you learned from a friend or research? How did you learn about it?
Yeah, I was super interested in how Bitcoin was accessible to communities around the world. For example, in Kenya, there are large transaction costs if you're going to wire something, or you're also trapped by whatever the local currency is doing, or there are a lot of things that are sort of outside of your control. And so the emergence of a global cryptocurrency that is accessible to people around the world and 24/7, I think is really empowering, and was something that I wanted to be a part of. And so I started dabbling a little bit, as we often do, and then got in
Yeah.
pretty deep over the last bit.
Oh yeah. So we're pushing together social impact, social changes with Bitcoin, which is great to see. But even that trickling down to kids, right? As a fellow father, how do you teach your kids about Bitcoin, or have
Yeah.
you got them into Bitcoin at an early age?
Yeah, I mean, I just think like financial literacy education is so important. And with Carolina for Kibera,
Yes.
our nonprofit in Nairobi, we've got a girls' center called the Binti Pamoja Girls Center, and it focuses on a curriculum of financial literacy. And what we see is that you don't necessarily know how to save, or what investments are, or interest rates are, but once you actually have a little bit of skin in the game, and each member, and these are young people that are living in a community where the average income is less than $1.50 a day for many households. But if they're empowered with a little bit of resources and some education, they can begin to own their own lives and have agency and power. And so that's what I try and do with our kids too, is just expose them to the world, and see that don't take things for granted. You can get a lot done in the world if you have the type of mindset of, hey, I understand how money works and value works, but you're also frugal and stay hungry. And so that's what I like to be a part of things like that, and I'm looking forward to participating in the camp.
Oh yeah, and going to the camp in a second here. You mentioned financial literacy, and financial literacy is lost among a lot of adults, at this point. But even moving down to the kids, the younger generation that's coming up, we have a chance now to teach that financial literacy, as well as teach them about emerging technologies like Bitcoin and blockchain. So I want to get your comment here. What does the future hold for students who decide to learn about Bitcoin and blockchain technology now in something like a summer camp?
Listen, I think it's like one of the most exciting spaces. I mean, you hear about how it's difficult for young people to break in economically into new industries, especially when there's, during COVID, et cetera. This is in the path of progress. There's a famous quote that there's a tide in the affairs of men and women, and this is one of them. And what's super interesting about it is that you can contribute no matter where you are in the world, as long as you have an internet connection. I know there are a number of folks that are really working on improving broadband access in other parts of the world. But you can get yourself growing and find that incredibly fulfilling and empowering, and frankly make some money doing it, which is great.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure parents love to hear that. Hey, I don't have to give my kids allowance, or if I do, I can give it in Bitcoin, and they'll be well off long term. So, any parents watching this is a great industry to get them involved in, right?
You know what's cool too is you took donations for the camp in Bitcoin, and we got our first contribution for Carolina for Kibera in Bitcoin like 2 weeks ago. And so from somebody that was international, right? So they didn't pay the wiring fee. They didn't, it went straight in, and that's pretty incredible. And again, like empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, people don't realize it yet, but I think we're starting to get that impact with something like the Bitcoin Summer Camp in Charlotte or the Crypto Kids Camp in Inglewood. And from your standpoint, a lot of times education isn't looked at as an investment tool, which it's crazy to think about. But as someone who works in the venture capital space, what could you tell other VCs about funding educational sources like this at the Bitcoin Summer Camp?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it starts, right? And the thing is about investments is it really is kind of a club. I mean, that's why I think so many people have been so excited by models like Robinhood and frankly, like, are getting into crypto who have not been investing traditionally in the past. It doesn't need to be a club. As long as you have credible, good education and from people that you can trust. And so this is, there's something else that's really interesting about educating young people, and that is if you think about voting. Like, I'm involved right now in an organization that supports veterans who run for office. Well, with voting, if you vote between the age of 18 and 22, you are like dramatically more likely to vote across, like, for the rest of your life. And so it's a similar thing. If you learn the principles of financial education and frankly empowerment, and you do that early, you have like a huge leg up, and you've got this momentum. And that's what we have an opportunity to do here with this camp.
Oh yeah, and not just like you said, momentum going forward, but basically a pipeline to some of these bigger companies, right? If you have a kid, let's say 12 years old at a camp, learns about Bitcoin, sparks that interest, they get into tech, coding, and move into sort of the blockchain industry. These same companies that were funding camps could essentially have their own employees in 10 years. You know what I mean? You're basically investing in the future. So speak to that a little bit. Do you think other companies see it as a pipeline, as a way to get students to either work in the industry or for their company?
Yeah, they really should. And that is, and you've got an opportunity as a company to help shape this. You participate in it in the early stages. And so I really think that's an incredible opportunity. I frankly don't see many traditional companies yet having wrapped their head around how significant an opportunity this is. So you have a lot of incumbents that are coming into the space, and frankly, that's when you have the most opportunity for entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. So if and I don't think that's restricted by age, by the way. I mean, when you think about folks that can make a big impact, you can it's not limited to being 30, 40 years old, right? I mean, you can get started in your teens, and this is a great industry to take your first foot into.
Mm-hmm. And yes, as you said before, a lot of the financial literacy that people didn't learn, venture capitalists are, not, I don't think they are aware of how much impact this can have. All of these steps to where I think we can have sort of a future where kids can get involved in technology and Bitcoin. And in that future, do you see your kids or even thinking further along, grandkids, do you see a future where they use the current financial system, or do you think Bitcoin and blockchain technology will be the standard?
I think there's going to be a hybrid throughout my lifetime. I do think Bitcoin is really powerful as both a store of value in the Western cultures, but also as a means of transaction, particularly in to the developing world. And I think that method, the cryptocurrency in general, is incredibly powerful and is going to be a major part of our lives going forward. So yeah, I really do think that we're in the early stages of this. I really do believe that this is, if we might not even be at the first inning in terms of sort of growth and maturity of the industry. And obviously it's a roller coaster too. So be careful out there, right? Don't go crazy, but that's a basic tool of financial literacy, right? Is like teaching kids about, hey, portfolio allocation. And you can think about portfolio allocation if you have like $1, right? Just divide it up. My co-founder with Carolina for Kibera was a nurse, and she took a grant. I gave her a grant. I didn't have a lot of money. I was a college student, but she took a grant for just 2,000 shillings, which was $26 at the time. This is back in 2000. Wow. And she started a business. She started selling vegetables. She was undercutting her competition, developing some savings, and then she pursued her dream, started a small medical clinic. And that clinic today is a hospital, and it treats over 30,000 patients a year. And that started with, $26, right? But $26 in the hands of someone that is remarkable, has a lot of talent, learned financial literacy. She knew it, right? She knew the cost of that cab ride, and how much a hawker's license would cost, et cetera. So those are really the building blocks, and I think that's one of the great opportunities that we have here.
Oh, yeah. And again, I would like to say, full disclosure, I am on the board teaching the Bitcoin Summer Camp, and Rye Barcott is one of the donors. And because you have donated to that camp, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, kids will be taught, they will be impacted by the technology, but do you think parents, how important is it for parents to also learn what their kids are learning? Because I know for a fact, my grandmother and my mom, they couldn't really use a cell phone until I taught them. So I think kids may have that same impact with their parents. What do you think, Rye?
Yeah. By the way, my dad might still not use a cell phone. I go back to this, just life-changing experience I had before the Marine Corps in Kibera, Nairobi. And one of the principles of the organization, which was not my idea, it was my co-founders who grew up in the community, was that when our scholarships, we're only going to give a scholarship if the parent is invested in some way. And that doesn't need to be a large check, but they need to be invested. They need to be brought into it, because, those of us who have had two loving parents, we're so fortunate. And that is such an important role that parents can play. I think it's awesome that the Bitcoin Camp is going to help teach and educate parents as well as their students, so that they can get up the curve together and do something together. Because that's really one of the most enriching things about being a parent too, is doing things with your kids and growing and learning with your kids. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's terrific. And if it's all right with you, Isaiah, I'd love to just do one little shout out here to the person that connected us, Mike Novogratz, who of course is his own big figure in the industry. And we know this, but maybe not everybody else does. But has a little interest in Bojangles. So I wish I was in North Carolina, which is shooting this film, so that we could be eating some Bojangles together. But I mentioned Mike in part because he's also done really awesome work in criminal justice reform, and that's part of what I love about this space, is that you have a lot of people, a lot of doers, a lot of the builders in this space who are incredibly philanthropic. They're entrepreneurs. They built things themselves, and they're giving back. And at the end of the day, giving back is not selfless. It's actually in your self-interest. When you give back, you live a more fulfilling life. And so right. I'm glad to be a very small part of the Bitcoin camp. And let's grow and build this thing.